December 16, 1985, 5:26 p.m., Midtown Manhattan, 46th Street. The humidity of a New York winter sticks to the skin like a cold shroud. Outside Sparks Steakhouse, the air smells of roasted meat, expensive cologne, and diesel exhaust. A black Lincoln Town car pulls up to the curb. Inside, Paul Castellano, the Pope of the Gambino family, adjusts his silk tie. He is the most powerful man in the American Mafia, but he is old. And in this world, old age is a target. Click. The sound of a heavy car door closing. Then the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of boots on the pavement. 4 men in Russian-style fur hats and trench coats appear like ghosts from the holiday crowd. Before Castellano can even reach for his door handle, the atmosphere shatters. The cracks of semi-automatic fire echo off the skyscrapers. Glass sprays like diamonds across the sidewalk. The Pope is dead before his head hits the leather seat. 3 blocks away, sitting in a parked car, John Gotti watches the blue police lights begin to dance in the reflection of a storefront window. He doesn't smile. He just lights a cigarette, the ember glowing like a dying star. The smoke curls around his perfectly tailored $2,000 suit. To the world, this was a simple power grab. To the FBI, it was a declaration of war. But what nobody knew, not the commission, not the underlings, and certainly not the victims, was that the hit on Castellano was only the second most dangerous thing Gotti did that week. The real masterpiece was the Shadow Ledger, a $600,000 frame job designed to incinerate his rivals from the inside out. For Gotti, becoming the boss wasn't enough. He needed to be the only one left standing. As Gotti exhales, he whispers to his driver, "The bullets were for Paul. The paper is for the rest of them." But one man was already watching Gotti from the shadows, a man who knew the $600,000 didn't actually exist. November 24, 1985, Ozone Park, Queens. The Bergin Hunt and Fish Club is a place of peeling linoleum, the smell of stale espresso, and the constant low-frequency hum of paranoia. It's the kind of place where men talk in whispers while the neon sign flickers overhead. John Gotti sits at a scarred wooden card table, surrounded by his inner circle, the volatile Angelo Ruggiero and the cold, calculating Sammy the Bull Gravano. The problem wasn't just Paul Castellano's leadership. The problem was the math. Castellano was greedy, taking a heavy tax on every drug deal, every construction site, and every hijacked truck. Discontent was a fire, and Gotti was the gasoline. But Gotti knew the rules. If he killed the boss without the commission's permission, the other 4 families, Genovese, Lucchese, Bonanno, and Colombo, would be forced to kill him to maintain the life. "We don't just kill him," Gotti says, leaning into the yellow light of the table lamp. His voice is a gravelly rasp. "We make it look like he was stealing from the commission. We make them want him dead as much as we do." Gotti produces a manila folder. Inside are fabricated bank records and handwritten ledgers. They show a systematic diversion of $600,000 from a joint family construction racket in Brooklyn. The destination? A private offshore account purportedly belonging to Castellano's secret mistress. It was a lie, meticulously crafted over months. The $600,000 was actually Gotti's own war chest, gathered from unsanctioned heroin sales that Castellano had strictly forbidden. Gotti was using his own illegal profits to frame his boss for skimming from the other families. The rain hammers against the club's boarded-up windows. "If the Genovese believe Paul is holding out on them," Sammy whispers, "they'll look the other way when we hit him." But Gotti's eyes stay fixed on the door. He knew the plan had a leak. A bookie named Joey Flowers had seen the ledger being forged, and Joey had just disappeared. December 2nd, 1985. 02:15 a.m., the meatpacking district. The smell of wet sawdust and copper hangs heavy in the air. Joey Flowers' scalise is strapped to a wooden chair in the back of a refrigerated warehouse. His breath comes out in white plumes. Standing over him is Angelo Ruggiero. Angelo doesn't look like a mobster. He looks like a tired plumber, but his hands are stained with things water can't wash off. "Who did you tell, Joey?" Angelo asks, his voice deceptively soft. He taps a heavy ring against a meat hook. Clink, clink, clink. Joey is shaking. He had been a peripheral player, a man who moved numbers but couldn't keep his mouth shut. He had seen the shadow ledger on a desk at the Bergen. He thought he could sell that information to the FBI for a ticket out of the life. He didn't realize that in Gotti's world, information isn't currency, it's a death sentence. Gotti's strategy required total silence. If the rumor of a frame job reached the ears of Vincent the Chin Gigante, the boss of the Genovese family, the plan would crumble. The $600,000 frame was the only thing keeping the other families from retaliating against Gotti for the upcoming coup. Angelo sighs and nods to a man in the corner. The sound of a chainsaw idling fills the room, a terrifying mechanical roar that drowns out Joey's pleas. 10 minutes later, the warehouse is silent again. Joey Flowers is gone, reduced to packages that would never be found. Back in Queens, Gotti receives a phone call. One word, clean. He hangs up and looks at the ledger. The $600,000 ghost was now protected by blood. But the FBI's C-16 squad was already picking up chatter about a massive financial rift between Gotti and the Pope. December 10th, 1985, Staten Island, the White House. Paul Castellano lived in a mansion that looked like a temple to ego. High on a hill, he sat in his study, surrounded by fine art. He was holding a glass of scotch, staring at a report from his accountant. "There's a hole, Paul," the accountant says, his voice trembling. $600,000, it's gone. It looks like it was moved through the construction union locals. Castellano's face turns a deep, bruised purple. He thinks he's being robbed, but he suspects his own captains are incompetent. He doesn't realize he's looking at a ghost. Gotti had leaked the forged documents into Castellano's own internal mail, making it look like a discovery by his loyalists. "It's Gotti," Castellano snarls. "He's trying to show me I can't control my own books." Castellano calls for a meeting. Not with Gotti, but with the commission. He wants Gotti's crew disbanded. He wants them broken. This was the exact reaction Gotti anticipated. By forcing Castellano to move against him based on a lie, Gotti created the self-defense justification he needed to strike first. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit bar in Howard Beach, Gotti is meeting with an emissary from the Lucchese family. He shows him a leaked copy of the same ledger. "Look at what Paul is doing to us," Gotti says, feigning outrage. "He's building a retirement nest egg with our blood." The Lucchese emissary leaves, but turns back. "If this is true, Paul is a dead man. But if you're lying, John, you'll be the one they find in a trunk." January 1986, the Ravenite Social Club. The king is dead. Long live the king. John Gotti is officially the boss of the Gambino family. He is on the cover of Time magazine. He walks the streets of Little Italy like a movie star, shaking hands, kissing grandmothers, and handing out $100 bills to kids. The dapper Don has arrived, but heavy is the head that wears the crown. The $600,000 lie is now his greatest liability. The other families, the ones who allowed the hit to happen because they thought Castellano was stealing, now want their share of the recovered funds. "They want their taste, John," Sammy warns him in the back of the Ravenite. "The Genovese, the Luccheses, they want the $600,000 redistributed." Gotti has to scramble. He uses the heroin money he had hidden, the very money that would have gotten him killed under Castellano's rules, and finds it in one of Castellano's supposed safe houses. He pays out the other families with his own illegal profits, disguised as recovered loot. It was a masterclass in money laundering. He was paying for his own life with his own drug money, while everyone thanked him for his honesty. The legend of the Teflon Don was growing. He was the man who could do no wrong. But the FBI was watching the cash flow. They noticed that the recovered money consisted of bills that hadn't even been printed when Castellano was allegedly skimming. The paper was too new. 1987, the apartment above the Ravenite. The FBI's C-16 squad had been humiliated by Gotti's acquittals. He was Teflon, nothing would stick. But they had a new weapon. They had successfully bugged the apartment of Nettie Sorelli above the Ravenite Social Club, where Gotti held his real meetings. The agents sat in a van blocks away, wearing headphones, listening to the static. Then they heard it. the rasping voice of the king. "I gave them the money, Sammy. I gave them the ghost." Gotti laughs on the tape. The sound is metallic and thin, but the words are heavy. "I frame the guy, I kill the guy, and then I pay the neighbors with my own cash to make sure they stay happy. It's beautiful." The agents froze. They didn't just have a murder conspiracy. They had the confession of a fraud that reached across all 5 families. Gotti's ego had become his own informant. He talked because he wanted Sammy to know how smart he was. He talked because he believed he was untouchable. But Gotti was also playing a game with the bugs. He began to feed the microphones false information about a massive drug shipment coming into the Jersey docks. While the feds scrambled to Jersey, Gotti was actually meeting with a high-ranking judge in a Queens diner. 1988, Howard Beach. Every time Gotti beat a case, he became more of a folk hero. But the hierarchy of the Mafia is built on stability, and Gotti was chaos. The other bosses, particularly the Chin Gigante, were starting to realize they had been played. Gigante was a man who walked the streets in a bathrobe, feigning insanity to avoid the feds. He was the opposite of Gotti. He hated the cameras, and he hated being lied to. He began his own investigation into the $600,000. He contacted the union leaders Gotti claimed were involved. Their answers didn't match Gotti's story. "John is a peacock," Gigante reportedly told his underboss, "and peacocks are only good for feathers, not for business." The tension in the city was palpable. It was a cold war between the Gambinos and the Genovese. Gotti started traveling with an armored convoy. He didn't trust his own captains anymore. He began to demote men who had been with him since the Bergen days, replacing them with sycophants who wouldn't question the $600,000 hole in the books. One evening, a car bomb detonates in Brooklyn. It wasn't meant for Gotti, but for his underboss, Frank DiCicco. The message was clear. The commission knew about the frame job, and the bill was finally coming due. 1990, the final stand. The FBI finally strikes. They arrest Gotti, Sammy Gravano, and Frank Locascio. They play the tapes from the apartment above the Ravenite. For the first time, Sammy the Bull hears what his boss really thinks of him. On the tapes, Gotti is heard belittling Sammy, calling him a crazy dog, and taking all the credit for the Castellano hit. Gotti even suggests that if anyone has to take the fall for the shadow ledger and the $600K fraud, it should be Sammy. Sammy, sitting in a cold jail cell, feels the weight of 1,000 betrayals. He had killed for Gotti. He had helped create the lie that put Gotti on the throne, and now he was being discarded like a piece of trash. "He used me," Sammy tells the federal prosecutors. "He used the money, he used the frame, and now he's using me as a scapegoat. I'm done." The $600,000 frame job is finally laid bare in a courtroom. Sammy takes the stand, the highest-ranking mobster ever to turn informant. The dapper Don isn't a hero. He's a man who lied to his own brothers to steal a crown. As Sammy describes the night they forged the ledgers at the Bergen, Gotti leans over to his lawyer and whispers loud enough for the first row to hear, "The bull didn't just flip. He died the day he walked in here." April 2, 1992, Federal Court, Brooklyn, 10:14 a.m. The air inside the courtroom is thick, stagnant, and smells of old paper and nervous sweat. Outside, a circus of media cameras and weeping supporters gathers, but inside, the silence is heavy enough to crush a man's lungs. John Gotti sits at the defense table. His hair is a silver monument to vanity, every strand in place. He wears a double-breasted charcoal suit that costs more than most people's cars. He looks like a king waiting for a coronation, but the crown today is made of iron. The jury foreman stands. The paper in his hand trembles slightly. Guilty. The word falls like a guillotine blade, then again. Guilty. Then again, 13 times. Racketeering, murder, conspiracy, tax evasion. And there it was, the counts related to the financial manipulation of the Gambino books. The very $600,000 shadow ledger Gotti had used to frame Paul Castellano had become his own roadmap to a graveyard with no headstone. The FBI hadn't just used Sammy Gravano's words, they used Gotti's own pride. They showed how the money moved, how the lies were structured, and how Gotti had essentially outsmarted himself. Gotti's face remains a mask of stone, not a muscle twitches. He doesn't flinch as Judge Leo Glasser sentences him to life without the possibility of parole. He has lost his empire. He has lost the $600,000 war chest he spent his life building. Most importantly, he has lost his freedom. He is no longer the Teflon Don. He is federal inmate 18261-053. As he is led away in handcuffs, the metal clicking against his wrists with a cold final rhythm, the urban atmosphere of New York feels different. The sky over Brooklyn is a bruised purple. The streets of Little Italy are quiet. The social clubs empty, the men who once cheered his name now looking over their shoulders. The Pope was gone, the dapper Don was in chains, and the $600,000. It was never really about the money. It was about the audacity to believe that one man could control the truth forever. In the end, the cost of the frame job was total. It cost the lives of Castellano and his driver. It cost Joey Flowers his existence in a meatpacking district warehouse. It cost Sammy Gravano his honor. And it cost Gotti the only thing he ever truly loved, the image of his own power. In his final night in a New York holding cell, before the transport to a maximum security void in the Midwest, Gotti receives a visitor. Not a lawyer, but an old man from the old country who slips past the usual bureaucracy. He leans against the glass, his eyes like polished obsidian, and whispers, "Paul sends his regards, John. You didn't kill him with bullets. You died the day you wrote that ledger." June 10th, 2002. Federal Medical Center, Springfield, Missouri. The fluorescent lights of the prison hospital flicker with a clinical, soulless hum. The air here smells of antiseptic and decay. John Gotti lies in a narrow bed, a shadow of the man who once stood outside Sparks Steakhouse. His throat, once used to bark orders and boast of his invincibility, is consumed by cancer. He is far from the lights of Manhattan, far from the $2,000 suits and the handshakes on Mulberry Street. He is alone with the ghost of his own making. He dies at 12:48 p.m. The shadow ledger and the $600,000 frame job are now footnotes in Mafia history, a legendary tale of a masterclass in deception that backfired with the force of a tectonic plate shifting. Gotti didn't just lose his life in prison, he lost the narrative. The story of the $600,000 isn't a story of wealth. Gotti proved that the Mafia wasn't just about guns and muscle. It was about the stories they told each other to justify the blood. He wrote a script where he was the hero, the savior of the Gambino family. But he forgot that in a docudrama, the truth always finds a way to the surface through the cracks in a man's ego. Today, tourists walk past Sparks Steakhouse on 46th Street, checking their phones, looking for a place to eat, entirely unaware of the blood that once slicked the pavement where they stand. They don't know about the shadow ledger, or the man who tried to play high-stakes chess with the 5 families using ghost money. But in the dark corners of Ozone Park, in the back rooms where the espresso is still strong and the whispers are still low, they still talk about the $600,000 ghost. They talk about the man who thought he could frame a pope and rule a city. The moral of the Teflon Don is a simple, brutal reality. In the world of crime, your greatest weapon, your intellect, your deception, your tongue, is often the very thing that eventually points back at your own heart. Lealdad has a price that cannot be negotiated, and John Gotti tried to pay it with counterfeit bills and a ledger full of ghosts. John Gotti changed the face of the American Mafia forever, taking it from the shadows of the old world and thrusting it into the neon glare of the media age. But was he a genius strategist who almost pulled off the perfect heist, or just a lucky gambler who eventually ran out of chips? The $600,000 frame job remains one of the most daring, complex, and ultimately fatal deceptions in criminal history. Would you have done it differently? If you were in Gotti's shoes, facing a boss who wanted you dead, would you have trusted your inner circle with a lie this big, or would you have kept the secret until the grave? Leave a comment below with your take on the shadow ledger. Subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden layers of true crime, and hit that like button if you want us to cover the full brutal rise and fall of Sammy the Bull Gravano. The streets have 1,000 stories, and we're just getting started. We'll see you in the next case.